Okay, it's 5 o'clock. The Blount County Commission Human Resource Insurance Committee will meet Tuesday, March 31, 2015, 5 p.m., room 430, Blount County Courthouse in Maryville, Tennessee. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss possible action regarding each of the following items: dental insurance rate increase, the current status of health fund, Evergreen Solutions presentation, employee handbook policy updates. This is a special call meeting. In the event of an emergency evacuation, alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you have reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building, being mindful of others evacuating in emergency vehicles. At this time, I'll call the roll. Mitchell. Here. Barong. Here. Dunlap. Caskey. Kaler. Farmer. Lewis. Stinnett. Chris. Merle. Here. 6 present, 4 absent. We have a quorum. First order of business is to elect an interim Human Resources Committee chair. Floor is now open for nominations.
I'd like
Commissioner
Crisp.
Commissioner Chris, you're recognized. Ms. Chris, you're recognized. Sorry.
Thank you. I would like to nominate Mayor Mitchell as the interim chair.
Second.
Is there a second? Barong seconds. Is there additional nominations? Chair will stand for a motion to close nominations. Kaler moves. Is there a second? Barong seconds. All in favor of closing nominations say aye. Opposed say no. Nominations are closed. The question is now to elect Mitchell as the interim chairman of the HR committee. Discussion. Members ready for the question? Sir, I don't have any idea. Steve who? Mike Lewis is the chairman. The vice chairman's Caskey of a funeral. It's all right.
Yes, it is just for today.
Interim chairman. When your name is called, either vote Mitchell,
Abstain.
present, or not present, not voting. Mitchell,
Not voting.
present, not voting. Barong,
Yes.
Mitchell. Dunlap's absent. Caskey's absent. Kaler.
Absolutely.
Mitchell. Yes. Farmer's absent. Lewis absent. Stinnett. Mitchell. Miss Chris. Mitchell. Mr. Merle. Mitchell. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 present not voting. Mr. Mitchell, would you please change your vote so we will have a majority?
Mitchell.
You are elected, sir. You got railroaded.
Jane's gonna move your computer over here. Jane's gonna move your
Okay.
computer.
That's fine.
I'll get it.
closed it.
Thank you. This time, I'd like to ask if there's any public input on items on the agenda. Seeing none. Discussion and possible action on the dental insurance rate increases effective 7/1/2015. Jenny?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It was my initial intent to bring before the committee an increase in the dental rates that was being allocated to us from Blue Cross Blue Shield. However, the new broker that you selected has hit the ground running and has been able to work with Blue Cross Blue Shield to put that increase on hold until January of 2016. At that time, we can expect to have a renewal increase in the dental rates, but CBIZ will be in attendance at our next scheduled meeting, which will be April the 21st, and we'll discuss that, all of the items that he has for us at that time pertaining to this. So that's all there is for that one. It changed after we sent the agenda out, so.
Is there any questions or any discussions? Any questions for Jenny? Moving on, discussion and possible action on the current status of the health fund. Jenny?
Yes, insurance is something that we need to be, or I feel like we need to be spending more time on. It's not something that we can just set rates at one point in the year and then not come back and take another look at it until the next year. It's a rapidly changing industry. There is a document in your packet, excuse me, it's on page 2 of the packet, that is going to talk about or reflect the state of the fund, the health fund. And if you'll notice, it's kind of separated out into 3 sections. Mr. Vineyard is available. He's going to kind of walk us through this. So if it's okay, Mayor, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Vineyard.
Mr. Vineyard?
I don't know if you can see on the, at least for members of the audience, it is on the screen what I'm going to talk about. In the first box that is framed in the darker color, we start out with a fund balance July 1, 2013, or an ending fund balance of June 30, 13, with $5,930,000 of fund balance in our health fund. That year we had revenues of $18.4 million. We had net adjustments to IBNR expense, and what that is incurred but not reported claims. It would be claims in the pipeline, if you will. And those adjustments amounted to $214,000, and what that means is we had over-reserved, and every year at audit time we adjust that reserve based on claims history. So for last fiscal year, we were able to reduce the reserve based on the claims. Then we had actual expenses of $19.3 million. The expenses that we track in our health fund are more than just claims. So it's our third-party administrator fee, it's our reinsurance fee, it's our Affordable Care Act fees, and then it's claims. So all of those pieces of expense roll up into our health fund. So at the end of June 30, 2014, last fiscal year, our audited fund balance was $5.2 million. So we consumed $700,000 worth of fund balance last fiscal year. All right, if you'll move to the next box, that reflects the current fiscal year. So we started with a beginning fund balance July 1 of $5.2 million. We project revenues based on actuals and then the balance of the year to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $19 million. And we're projecting our expenses, all of those that I described earlier, of being in the neighborhood of $20.3 million. So as of right now, as we sit with the current premium structures, we're looking at an estimated fund balance June 30 this year, 2015, at $3.9 million. Now, in past advice that our broker has given this body, they have said for an employment base our size and for claims our size as an employer for a self-insurance fund, we ought to have somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million in reserve. So as you can see, we're right on that estimate, not taking into consideration what our adjustments for IBNR may be at June 30 this year. Now, the third box is what has been presented to the Budget Committee based on the current premium structures. And that means no changes in premium structures until this body decides to act on premiums. And it is also part of the number that has been reported in the news where we are $12 million out of balance on our budgets that have been presented to the Budget Committee. So right now, as we stand, we would start in the absence of any other action or in the absence of any significant change into the way the fund performs, we would start next fiscal year with approximately $4 million, $3.9 million in fund balance. We would estimate revenues to be somewhere around $19.5 million. And our estimated expenses for next year are estimated at $22.2 million. And I'll apologize to those members of the audience right now, you can't read that language up there, but that asterisk next to the revenue source says revenues are currently believed to be overstated and will be adjusted accordingly. That is based on information that we have from the broker right now. Now, revenues to this fund are made up of two items. They're made up of employee contributions, they're made up of employer contributions, and made up of retiree contributions. And that's how all of those expenses are paid for. So as of right now, if we weren't to do anything with the recommended budget the proposal to the Budget Committee right now, we would be looking at June 30, 16 of a fund balance of around $1.1 million. And I know from past conversations and discussions among this body, that's not anything that you all are interested in doing, but I'm bringing this to you to make certain that you're aware that we have a need to address the issues related to our health care. And to Jenny's point, this is something we have to really actively manage now. So that concludes my remarks.
Any discussion? Any questions?
We can defer. Can we defer this till next month's scheduled meeting so we can review it?
Let this be the agenda for the April meeting?
That would be my recommendation, put it on the agenda.
Is that what, Jenny, do you have some?
Yeah, that was initially my plan. I wanted to bring it up while we were here having this called meeting to give you all the opportunity to think about this and look at this before we have our scheduled meeting in April. And hopefully by that time, the new broker is going to have a little bit more information for us as well that we can use in, factoring in making any kind of decisions on this.
So is that a motion to put this on the agenda for the April meeting? Do I have a second?
Second.
Is that going to need a roll call vote or voice vote? Okay, we'll have a voice vote. All those in favor of putting this on the agenda for the April meeting, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We'll put this on the agenda for the April meeting. possibly the only thing on the agenda for the April meeting if we, this is going to take some quite a bit of discussion. Moving on, discussion and possible action on the Evergreen Solution presentation. Jenny?
Yes. You all have heard, let me get to it here, a good bit about Evergreen through some of our conversations that we've had, and I wanted to get this in front of you just as quickly as we possibly could. I am hopeful that this committee will adopt a resolution to implement the recommendation for a classification and a compensation system. I've included a draft of what that resolution would look like in your packet. That's on page 3. That's for you to review. There's no action needed on that today. Hopefully we could pass that on and vote on that in the April meeting as well. So I do want to take a minute, though, and introduce Nancy Berkeley. She is from Evergreen Solutions, and she's here to do a presentation for you. It'll begin on slide 4 in your packet, and I will move us along so that the people in the audience can see the presentation as well. So, Mayor, if we could recognize Nancy, that would be great.
Nancy, would you like to come up, please?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Nancy Berkeley, and I am going to just go through briefly our study process. And again, I was very happy, we're very happy as Evergreen Solutions to do this classification compensation study for Blount County. I'll review briefly the study process, talk a little bit about what we learned in what we call outreach, give you highlights really of the classification part of this study, the review results. Clearly the compensation results I'll go over, and then the recommendations, the ultimate recommendations, and take questions. For the study process, we did conduct what we call employee outreach, where we came to the county, myself and another consultant, and conducted employee orientation meetings and focus group sessions. In those orientation meetings, we explained a process for the employees to utilize something called a job assessment tool, where individually they would complete what the work was that they were performing so that we could understand that clearly, not just use, if you will, current job descriptions, which may or may not be outdated. So we use that process quite extensively, the job assessment tool, to develop something called what we call a point factor score, which is commonly used in compensation classification studies. That determines for us the internal equity, if you will, the value of each of the positions, the work that's being performed here at the county. So we looked, after collecting all of that data from the job assessment tool, or I should probably say simultaneously, we also conducted a salary survey. That's where we get the external equity piece. So what we're trying to do there is say, for the work that's being performed at the county, what are the peers paying for that exact same work? The two together are utilized in developing all of our recommendations, and I want to stress that it's the two together always, in any of our methodology, and pretty much any consultant, it would be the two together. You're not just looking at salary survey data, you're looking at what the work is that's being performed. I realize I forgot something in here. We also worked with the county to develop a compensation philosophy. So forgive me that I forgot to mention that in here, but that also governed a little bit of what our recommendations are to the county. So with that compensation philosophy, a few things just as a point of note. Again, I apologize that's not in the presentation, but one is that it was decided that the county, this is meeting with the elected officials here and mayor, that the county would like to be slightly, I'll call it slightly, leading the market, okay, in its pay structure. This doesn't necessarily mean every single individual is or isn't. Individual salaries are something different than the structure that we develop, but I'd say just maybe slightly ahead of the market. By slightly ahead, what we did then when we collected all the salary survey data, we looked at the salary survey at what we call the 60th percentile. So the 60th percentile of your peers, you'd be just slightly ahead of the market being 50%, and market generally being always considered midpoint of a salary range. Okay. The other discussion in the compensation philosophy was that you would probably want to utilize some combination of method of progressing salaries in a structure in the future, whereby you'd use performance review, and as well as potentially either across the board increases and or in some cases somehow related to time and positions, so somewhat of a hybrid approach. Okay, sorry. Okay, we then after we looked at both the internal and external equity. We came up with a proposed pay plan for the county, and then recommended implementation options of that pay plan. The structure itself is one thing. The implementation of it, of course, is another, and that's where the cost comes in. Implementation is what I like to call how we recommend placing employees' salaries into that structure. We will be in the process, and we came up with the cost estimates for those. These are annualized salary only costs, no benefits associated with that. That would have to be determined as well. And then we are in the process of revising, or will be in the process very shortly of revising job descriptions. So we'll utilize for that, if there exists a current job description, we'll utilize the current job description, and we'll take the input from the JET and incorporate the two together. Okay, from employee outreach, what we found was generally the employees believed that the county was a stable place to work. They like the opportunity to make a positive impact on the community. They did express some frustration about not receiving raises consistently, I'd say, in the recent years. I will say that the employees, were a very polite group of people here, very respectful. We get all sorts of things when we go to different places, so I certainly appreciate the fact that the employees express their concerns, but we're also very respectful of our being here, so that was actually a delight. Several employees believe that their job duties have expanded or changed, and their current job description, or they're not really sure. Does their compensation meet what their current job description says or doesn't say? They're really not sure in some cases. And some concern, and this is one we see, pretty much these are things we see every place we go, with potentially wages that aren't increasing as rapidly, concern over whether or not, healthcare costs would have a more significant impact on their salary. Again, these are pretty much what we see any place we go. With regard to classification structure, effectively, again, what we were, as you all know, what we were really determining for the county was coming up with a county-wide classification and compensation structure. So you roughly started off with 276 classification titles. We're recommending 203. We usually try to see if there's an opportunity to sort of pare it down a bit where it's appropriate. I'd say what I would call sometimes collapse some titles if you don't really need that definition for the purpose of actual career advancement. So we came up with 203 classification structure for the county. Many title changes. Sometimes these are very minor, and these are across the board. I can't even really say exactly what area these are specifically. It's just, again, without having a current comp and class system, it's pretty much kind of soup to nuts, everything included here. And 9 recommended, new recommended titles. These are really more for, perhaps sometimes we might suggest that one classification be changed to another classification title, but there might be one employee in that performing similar work or that same title, if you will, work. And then we're saying, but that one employee seems like they should be something different, so we create what we call a new title for that. It's just our terminology for that. Again, this is just an example of the recommended title changes. Again, I can't really make any necessary one statement or the other. In this regard, again, we just thought we do this because it's either the work that we see that looks like it should be called something different. Well, a lot of what we do sometimes is because what we are seeing in industry or what we saw with some of your peers when we were collecting the salary survey data. So we try to make recommendations that would be not alarming, if you will, to employees, but also bring it up to date a little bit as well. The salary range data that we did collect from, again, a little bit challenging here, I will admit, collecting the salary range data from peers. We did collect it for 17, the data collected on the left-hand side of 26 market peers that we attempted to collect data for. And we utilized 49 benchmark classifications when we collected this data. The next ones that I know they're really difficult to read in the audience here are the salary survey results. And if you'll notice, I just want to kind of point out we collected the data and then represented the data at the 60th percentile. So the 60th percentile where 60% of the peers would be below that mark, if you will, that data point, and 40% would be above. For both the minimum, for all of these data points, minimum, midpoint, and maximum of salary ranges. Typically, we compare where you would be to those, but because you didn't have one structure, we didn't actually give you those comparisons. We're giving you the results here, which is perfectly fine. We did on the right there, or one of the right-hand columns, it says survey average range. That's just to give of all of the ranges that were provided from the peers, just to kind of give us an idea of, okay, in this area, what are the ranges look like? So when we're developing, we're making recommendations for a pay plan, we try to stay in about the same area, if you will, of a range width from the minimum to the maximum. And then if you look to the far right, we have the number of responses for each one of those benchmark classifications. And this is comparing work to work. So we try, for the most part, to have at least 5. There's a few of them that go below 5, but try to at least have 5 responses for every single benchmark classification. So if you just page through those, or go through those. So what we did then was we look at that data and we say, okay, given that, what would we recommend for a pay plan? And we, again, in discussing with the county with regard to comp philosophy, suggest this open range plan, an open range plan where you have a minimum and a maximum and midpoints, this number of grades, and these range spreads, 55 to 65%. This is fairly typical of a best practice range spreads, I'd say, are anywhere from 50 to 70% for what I'd call a typical open range plan. 55 to 65, again, the range spreads tend to increase, not in every design. Again, this is sort of an art to doing this, and really a philosophy of how you want this done as well. But just in fact that the higher level positions, typically people are in those or enter into those, maybe with more experience, so they may even be entering, if you will, into that range with a salary that's further along than even the minimum. There's just, it's how salaries progress typically, and how you want to build that structure. Again, this is about the structure. Okay, then to take the employees, current employees' salaries and place them into that structure, we had to first look to see, are there employees who have salaries that are currently below the new recommended minimums? And there were some. So with that, we provided a cost to what I would do just to turn this system on. You'd have to at least bring those employees' salaries to the minimum, or at least that would be our recommendation. And that's $983,000. Again, annualized salary only cost. and that is adjustments for 308 employees. What I'll call it, ultimately recommending for you, because of the picture of where some of the salaries are currently, in that you have quite a large number of salaries that aren't even at midpoint or market. We're recommending this option, which we call move to midpoint. So first, you go through and do the bring employee salaries to the new minimums, and then employees with less than 1 year of tenure are saying, well, they could just be brought to the new minimum. Then employees with salaries, this is a formula, and this is called a compa ratio with 80% of midpoint. Below 80% of the midpoint, between 80 and 86 would be brought to 86. With this, and then it goes on and describes this as a graduated way, if you will, of bringing employees' salaries who are not at midpoint, trying to sort of bring them closer to the market. Those are the furthest away by this calculation, if you will, are brought a little bit more than those that are closest to the midpoint. All done mathematically, of course, to be fair and equitable to every single employee here. We aren't recommending that you, with this implementation, that you would adjust any salaries that are beyond the current midpoint. That probably doesn't feel really good for some employees who have salaries, above the midpoint, but effectively, employees with salaries above the midpoint, again, this is a comp and class study and implementation options. Not to say that they couldn't progress their salaries in the future, hopefully, with the county, but at this point, those with salaries not even at the market, the midpoints, and that's where we tried to align when we made the grade assignments for all the positions, they're the ones that probably need, if you will, some adjustments, and probably haven't benefited from adjustments as much in the past. Recent years, I should probably say. So that total annualized salary cost is 1.6 million, roughly. And that adjustment would be for 501 employees. And again, this does include the cost for the bring them in. So our recommendations are, of course, we would like to recommend that you implement the proposed classification and compensation structure, and all of the detail would be in our draft and full report. That you choose, if you will, an implementation, and we're recommending that move to market recommendation, and then communicate the results of the study to the employees individually, what that would mean to each and every employee, even those who are not receiving any adjustment. That you would continue to review the pay plan and the periodically, and again, this is something we actually would be working closely with HR to, so they'd understand the methodology, and quite frankly, I already do, to a certain degree, understand the methodology that we utilize, so you could make changes as you need to along the way. Along the way, meaning there might be a classification that becomes particularly challenging in either recruiting or retaining that position, that classification. So there you could conduct on your own a sort of a mini salary survey and say, hey, what did we really find? Should we increase that? Maybe change a pay grade. You can change a pay grade without changing the entire structure. You have to see how that would possibly affect the other positions again, because we're always looking not only just in one department or one area, we're looking across the county all the time when we're making those recommendations. And then hopefully you wouldn't need to have another comp and class study for probably 3 to 5 years. Our recommendations with this pay plan is that it should be what we call good for, I'd say, at least 3 years, and that means you would not have to adjust that structure at all. There's enough room in those widths to give across the board increases, to give performance increases, to progress salaries through that structure without moving it or changing it. Questions?
Any questions?
Yes. The period data non-collected, you solicited that information and
Yes.
they didn't return.
Yes, countless times.
The
I shouldn't say countless, several times.
several times. The collected data, I noticed, it's all cities, municipalities. And I understand that's the people that we're competing against, but without that other, for instance, Rome County, I see Anderson County in there, Rome and Jeff County, McMinn County, just why were the adjacent counties not included in this?
Not even, you mean ones that we didn't reach out to, you mean? Or the ones that we reached out to and wasn't able to collect, I'm sorry.
Well, Rome, Jeff County,
Okay,
McMinn County, adjacent counties to this county, doesn't appear that you requested that information.
okay. This was our recommended list of count of peers that we were surveying. It's, again, we're 26 market peers to start off with that we hopefully expected to collect data from is sufficient. Again, we're trying to get enough data to have enough responses to, again, we're comparing work to work. We just didn't. I mean, I can't, answer it other than we
Okay.
just didn't.
Sheriff, we've lost numerous people to Loudoun County this year.
Correct. Well, one about 2 weeks ago, and
Yeah.
some others to Lenore City and Loudoun County.
My point is, we're losing people to local county, Sevier County, Loudoun County. So it just seems like to me that those should have been included because those are people we're competing against too.
I wouldn't necessarily say that I completely disagree. I would say, however, I would doubt highly unless they have some significantly different pay structures, that data would alter the results of what we have here. As far as what we've ended up recommending, particularly in the sheriff's office for pay grade structure. In other words, we go through this several times with clients, and sometimes, with all due respect, we'll add in, take out a peer here or there, and it will not change mathematically the end results very much. If we've completely neglected, and you're going to tell me that no, they pay so significantly different that it would have changed those, then I would stand corrected. But I would imagine that's probably not the case. Does that make sense?
Don't agree, but makes sense. Anyone on that list that we collected data from has paid your company for the same service.
Pardon?
Anyone on the list here that has Alcoa, Chattanooga, Gatlinburg, Johnson City, has any of those people paid your company for the same service we're paying you for?
No, I'm going to say no unless it was, I don't recall.
Okay.
I can't
Thank you.
account for every single place.
Okay, thank
No.
you.
Not that I can think of, okay? But I certainly don't have all of our studies, and if that's what you're asking, I don't have all of our studies committed to memory. Question?
Would it not be also that some of these counties might not have the technology to give you this data?
Yes. Yes. It wasn't more difficult here to collect data, period. Yes, when you go to some areas that don't have the ability to give it to us, they'll just say, no, I'm not going to give you that. I can't give you that. And it may be, and forgive me that I don't know this off the top of my head, whether or not they even have a structure in place to begin with. So they could have possibly only been able to give average actuals, which would be the same for you all. If you were being asked to do a study before this comp and class, you could only give average actuals. And in only giving average actuals, those are individual salary data, and that is not a good comparison. Average actuals will give you data, if you will, about, again, employee salaries, but you have no idea why those employees are getting paid what they're getting paid. In other words, how those salaries or why those salaries progressed to the points in which they did.
Jenny, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was just going to add to Tom's question. Tom, we reached out to or asked Evergreen to reach out to the counties that are our peers in size. So we went to the two above us and two below us. So that's why you don't see some of those other, counties on there that you mentioned. Yeah, so if you take into consideration the fact with the example that you gave of the sheriff's office, with losing someone to Loudoun or Lenore City, because they're smaller than us and they don't have near as many people on their force, they can afford to pay those people more. And unlike, the size of the sheriff's the officers that the sheriff has, we have quite a bit more. So in that particular example, that might be one of those cases there. And then I also just wanted to add to Nancy's point about these counties that didn't respond. If she's exactly right, if I were ever asked to respond to a salary survey from somebody else, I wouldn't be able to do it. I don't have the means, I don't have the resources available to give them what they request. And that's probably my feeling, just based on what I've learned in the time here. That's probably the same thing for these counties. They probably just do not have the resources available in order to respond to something like that.
I was laughing when she said that because I know we're in that situation.
I understand, yeah.
But we're not losing anyone to Washington County or Chattanooga. So it just seemed like to me that would be, I would have thought that we would have included the people that are taking employees from us.
May I ask
Thank
how
you.
many employees they're taking?
I don't know. That's the problem. That's another reason. I don't know where people are going a lot of times. I don't find out until after the fact a lot of times that somebody's left. So until we get some of these things in place that we're working on, like Chronos, and I'm able to do some of these other things with the Evergreens, I will be able to answer these questions a lot better a year from now. Right now, I'm not in a position as your HR director to be able to answer some of these questions that you're asking.
We asked, I could add, we asked actually the employees in the focus group, where are people going and what's going on? And I can't honestly tell you whether, I'll have to go back and look at our data. I don't believe those were ones that were actually mentioned. Again, that doesn't, and that's some number of employees sitting there. But generally speaking, employees will tell us in focus group sessions, everybody's going here, everybody's going there. And quite frankly, pretty much every single place we go, it's not an overarching one place. If somebody, quite frankly, I would almost say to you, if you knew you had that significant of a problem, you probably would have done something about it by now. To one place. Several places I can understand, but all those things were taken into consideration, again, without having one structure in place. You can't even do a very good compare to begin with, quite frankly. All you can do is collect what you can on the salary data and then make the best. I think, as Jenny mentioned, you'll be in a better position in the future to be able to determine some of those things. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, we need to vote on sending this resolution on to the commission. Do we need? In April, okay, all right. Okay. Discussion and possible actions on the handbook policy updates.
Yes, so these are also included in your packet. They start on page 21. And the first policy update is regarding our pay periods. That's found in the classification and compensation section on page 8 of our current handbook. And we are basically just needing to update this to align with our current, with the move that we are going to biweekly pay periods. The second one is on our sick leave accrual, which is in our leave policies on section on page 22. And when we were attending the product design workshop from Chronos, we discovered through discussions with the Chronos team that their were a lot of other options on how we can allocate or accrue these sick days for our employees that will allow for better and more accurate tracking and cleaner from an accounting perspective. So we currently allocate the sick days to the employees via beginning on their 31st day of employment. They earn 1 sick day per month. My recommendation is that we change that allocation from the 31st day of employment to the first of the month following their 31st day of employment. And then thereafter, each employee would receive their sick day allocation on the first of each month. It'll be a lot cleaner and help us a lot more as we transition through into Kronos. This was not a decision that was made because of Kronos. It just came from the discussions that we were having working on that. And then the final policy update will be on our benefits eligibility. That's in the employee benefits section on page 31 of the handbook, which also, as we were in the same discussions at the product design workshop, we learned that we might have an opportunity for improvement in how we administer the benefit plan. We currently allow our new hires to begin their coverage on the 31st day of employment. So for example, if someone were to be hired today on March the 31st, their coverage would begin on April the 30th, but the employee would actually have to pay for the coverage from April the 16th through the 30th because they would, that's how our pay period runs. So we don't prorate them for their fees. So if we move our coverage to be effective the first of the month after the 31st day, this would allow the employee then to only pay for the coverage that they would actually have, and it would also be cleaner on the accounting side. And the same goes for the benefits termination effective dates. I'm recommending that we move to terminate the coverage at the end of a pay period rather than on the last day worked. For that same kind of a reason, it will allow, if I terminate on April the 6th, I'm paying for coverage through the 15th, but my coverage is going to end on the 6th. So I would recommend that we terminate their coverage at the end of the biweekly pay period in which the employee last worked. So this would then take effect when we go biweekly on July 1st. All of these changes I'm recommending go effect July 1st.
Is there any discussion on that?
Jenny, on the sick leave accrual, can you repeat that one more time for me? I'm trying to figure out the change it's going to have to my employees.
It may not apply to your employees. I think
didn't
your
think so.
accrual, yeah,
Okay.
I just caught that. Thank you for asking. Your accrual is done a little bit differently because of the nature of your work schedule. So this actually would be different for your employees.
Thank you.
Yours would stay the same.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? I do have a question. If someone is terminated, does that make a difference in when their benefit stop?
Well, we currently right now would stop their coverage on their termination date, but they may have paid for it through the rest of the month, but it's stopping on the day that they terminate, their last day worked. But they've paid for it because we're paying them for the whole, we're deducting it for the whole pay period. So what I'm recommending is that we just allow it to go through their biweekly pay period. So for example, if I'm trying to think here, if they were to, I think I have an example in the documents here. If their last day worked in the current pay period was on a Wednesday and that pay period ends on Friday, we would allow their coverage to end on Friday at midnight because they've paid for it through that day, through that pay period.
So even if, no matter what the situation of the termination is, we're going to pay for their health care, continue to pay for their health care?
Just through the end of that pay period. It's common practice outside at private companies. I've had it this way at 2 other places of employment where I've worked. It's a common practice to do. I'm just thinking from, trying to keep things cleaner from an accounting perspective and a payroll perspective about, refunding or any kind of thing like that.
You don't think that leaves this county at a risk if there is a hostile termination there and we're leaving them on our self-insured insurance plan over a period of time?
I mean, it's going to end with their pay, with the pay period. So I don't think it would be a lengthy time where if it is a hostile termination, where it would account to more than maybe a day or two, where they would have where they would have coverage when they're not working.
Okay. Would that be something that we would want the attorney to review before we actually implement that? Is that not something that that he would want to review as far as the legalities? I understand that they've already paid for it, but I do have a concern about that.
I can have him review it for sure. Yep. We can bring it back to the April meeting if you'd like.
I'd like to do that.
Okay.
Is that okay? Yep. Is that okay with everybody on, do we need to get a vote on that, or what do we need to do on the? Okay. I can't make a motion, so we may make a motion.
Make the motion, attorney.
Second.
Put it back on the April agenda.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I did have a question, Jenny, real quick, on the benefits eligibility. Now, that would be any department. So school, this is every department, because we would have to adjust, of course, our policies in our handbook.
Yes.
If the commission finally, if we pass it as a group and the commission passes that, then we would have to come behind that and make adjustments for the school department.
Correct. It
Okay.
would be for
I just wanna
any
make sure I
department that uses the
So we
county's
couldn't
insurance.
necessarily have our own, keep it the way we are. Well, we might be able to request it of you, but I understand you're going to run your department in this
Yes.
manner.
Yes.
You and Jody will follow these
We will.
guidelines for insurance
Correct.
eligibility. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, the motion is on to have the attorney review this and bring it back to the April meeting. Have a motion and a second. Do the voice vote on that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we moved on to the April meeting after review by the county attorney. Next up, any public input on items not on the, where am I at?
On a special call meeting, we can't have that.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, need a motion to adjourn, please. Motion?
Make a motion
Okay.
to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.